Good morning. We're here at the Detroit Diaspora Day Party. What's up, folks? All right. Feeling good. The 6th Detroit Diaspora Day Party, correct? Yeah, the 6th one, right? Yeah, so we give it up to Drake Pfeiffer. And this is the second Buy Back the Block panel discussion for this event. So I'm super excited to talk to the panelists that we've assembled here. This is going to be a really good conversation. We're surrounded by this dope black art. I'm looking behind me and to my side, and like I'm feeling good. You got the vendors here. I mean, this is going to be a great event. So I am super excited for it. My name is Ritchie Harrison. I am one half of Planning Test, the Everyday Sacred. We are a boutique consultancy here in the city of Detroit, and I am joined by my beautiful life partner and business partner, Clarinda Harrison. You want to say what's up to the people?
Yeah, what up, though, Detroit? I'm so happy to be here and so honored that Drake chose us again to moderate this really important conversation. Diversity and development is a way to ensure that Black wealth and Black prosperity is something that that doesn't evade us. It's also about cultural competency as we think about uses and ways in which we can ensure that space is made for our community to continue to thrive and to be in the city. And it's also about fostering belonging. And so I am excited as well because all of these folks who are on this panel are really about it. Like, these are not talkers, these are doers. And so today we are going to hear about the exciting work that they're doing, but also get resources and steps that you can take in order to enter the market if that's your interest, or just know about what's going on in the city. So let's get started, babe. Oh, I shouldn't call him babe. I'm a professional.
Yeah. So, yes, building on what Clarinda said, this is an exciting conversation. And what I find personally exciting is that we're having this conversation in this scene that's about music, that's about art, it's about culture, and we're talking about development, right? And those are the ways that we experience our city, right? Not just in one dimension, but we experience it in all these elements. And these are the folks that are going to talk about how important it is that we have more equity and development. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation. So let me introduce my esteemed panel here. And I'm going to start to my right here with Darnell Adams. He is the vice president of Detroit Community Initiatives for the Gilbert Family Foundation. So I'm going to let my panelists sort of give their own bio. I'm going to let you do your introduction. I'm just going to go through and just give a round of introductions. And then I'm going to turn it over to you all so you can introduce yourselves, all right? All right. Next to Darnell, we have Nicole Brown, Director of Strategic Partnerships and Community Engagement for Detroit Future City. And Nicole, I just want you to go ahead and wave at the people, yeah, that's right, all right. And now I'm going to turn to my left here, and we have Fabiola Fleuranvil, who is the managing partner at Icon Partners. So we're going to find more about what they're doing in the city of Detroit, all right. And on the end here, we have Chase Cantrell, Executive Director of Building Community Value, BCV, which provides real estate training, technical assistance, funding, and networking to Detroiters so that they can get involved in development. So let's give it up to our panelists right here, all right. So without further ado, let me just turn it over to our panelists. If you just share with the folks, just tell them a little more about yourself and what you're doing here in the city of Detroit, and we'll pass along. We'll start to the right here, and then we'll go left. All right?
Well, what up, Doe? All right. I know I'm always in the right space when I get my affirmative response from my uniquely Detroit greeting. My name is Nicole Brown. I am a proud fourth-generation Detroiter, and I've been working in community and economic development for the last 18 years, and so I've always spent most of my life working in nonprofits, and really excited to share with you guys the work that we're doing here at Detroit Future City. We are a think and do research tank, and so people are always like, what is a think and do research tank? Well, we have an amazing team of researchers led by Ashley Williams-Clark, who really look at critical issues impacting the city of Detroit, and then they work with our other team of colleagues around what we call our Thriving Resilient Neighborhoods body. And so that team focuses on everything from housing to climate resiliency, and all the things it really takes to be able to make Detroit a really strong city and continue to strengthen the work that is happening with our residents. And so I'm excited to share a little bit more about that and talk about a couple of reports that we recently produced.
Awesome. What up, though, everybody?
What up, though?
Darnell Adams. I'm the Vice President of Detroit Community Initiatives at the Gilbert Family Foundation. A little bit about me. I'm a third-generation Detroiter and grew up on the East Side. East Side?
East Side?
East Side?
Okay, East Side.
Yeah. It's okay. Yeah.
Grew up on the East Side.
West Side representation.
I know. That's okay. Still an East Sider. And what I think is unique about my career is that I have had the opportunity to work in many of the sectors that help to really move Detroit. And so from the nonprofit sector as a community organizer, then going off to work in government, managing all the inventory in the city of Detroit at the Detroit Land Bank Authority. You know, we're managing up to like 100,000 parcels at one point in time. Then transitioning to the private sector, working at Invest Detroit, understanding how money moves and how we needed to influence our neighborhoods. Now at the foundation, where philanthropy really does act as that sort of gap filler and innovation space. So again, just really happy to be here to discuss and talk about all the work that it relates to development across the city and sort of what my experience has been to support it.
All right, appreciate it.
Hello, I'm Fabiola Fleuranvil. I am the outsider. I'm from Miami, live in Miami, but I can now consider myself a part-timer just because I'm here a lot. So I had been investing since 2006. Years went by and did smaller scale projects in South Florida and in other parts of Florida. And then at some point, very quickly, you reach a very low ceiling in a market like that, right? You don't have other black developers. There's not an equity focus in South Florida. You definitely don't see women in the business. I had been looking for a market where I know I could be embraced. There's other models of black developers. I could be in a community where there's black entrepreneurship, that there's people are comfortable seeing that, right? They won't look at me as a young black woman saying, what is she doing here? She doesn't belong, in this business. As a woman, there's very few of us already. So it's helpful when you come into a community that's already accustomed to seeing, people like us. And did some soul searching, and it led me to Detroit. I had some really, really, really good close friends who are in the development business already, and I was like, I think I'm ready for the city. So I had been here since 2019. I found my current project, which is in the Russell Woods Dexter Ave neighborhood. Purchased that building the day of the shutdown in 2020, March 13. But even before that, I felt like all odds were against me, right? But that's the beauty that I bring as an outsider, because I don't know the stories of that community. I don't know the challenges, the history. I'm hearing stuff after the fact. But it gave me a fresh lens, fresh perspective to where I can come in and, knowing that I could never do something like that at scale. It's 138 units. I'm redeveloping it as 77 units of affordable senior housing. I could never do something like that in South Florida, right? One, they would not allow me to do something like that in South Florida. You have like the Cuban Mafia, and I can say that, right? You have, others, and they don't really want to see us to, make it like that. So they put a lot of barriers in place. So I'm just happy to be here, I'll say that.
All right.
Not just here, but in the city, in
Okay.
Detroit. I'm happy to be embraced by the city.
All right, I appreciate it. All right.
What up, though? So my name is Chase Cantrell. I'm a local village builder, and I say that to say that I help Detroiters understand the power that they have, and the lens that I do that through is real estate. I've been working in real estate for over 15 years. Started as a real estate and corporate lawyer at a big firm downtown. Most of the development projects, most of our clients did not look like us in this room, right? Most of them were white men with resources. So in 2016, I decided to leave that job, started an organization called Building Community Value, and we teach Detroiters how to do real estate development in neighborhoods. So we have a 7-week training course. We provide technical assistance. We bring in all kinds of resource partners, so funders, architects, contractors, all the folks you need to do real estate development. We've had over 400 people who have gone through that course since it started, and many of whom have gone back out into their neighborhoods to do real estate development, and really proud of the folks who are also scaling up. So now we have folks who are doing $7 million ground up projects. So A lot of success in that. I teach at the University of Michigan as well in the urban planning department. So also teaching real estate, the future of real estate. So looking at all of the cool things that are on the horizon and how real estate is changing. Also see myself as a policy advocate. So doing a lot of work with the city of Detroit to help make sure that the real estate ecosystem is working well for Black Detroiters. And I'm the vice president of READ, the Real Estate Association of Developers, which is a networking and advocacy group for Black developers in the city, bringing more resources to Black Detroiters who are doing development work. So, thinking about the ecosystem that welcomes people in, we really want to make sure that people who are interested in real estate have the resources, know that there are hundreds of people who are already doing this work that look like us, and that there are resources and support mechanisms for Detroiters to do that work.
All right, appreciate it. All right, let's show our panel some love right quick. You all excited about this conversation now, right? Okay, all right. So I want to get into some questions, but also let me just provide some context that adds a little flavor onto some things that we've heard. The initiative for inner city, for competitive inner city, ICIC and Grove Impact, they issued a report back in March of 2023. And in their report, they said Black and Hispanic real estate developers together make up less than 1% of the industry, right? So we're going to let that just say less than 1% of the industry. And they said that it's an enormous opportunity to address the nation's profound wealth gap. Making industry more diverse could create more than 50,000 new Black and Hispanic developers, almost 2 million new jobs, and more than 100 billion in new business revenue, right? So we're talking about like a lot of potential by getting into development. And so let's talk about some of the things that our panel can bring in as perspectives. And so I'd like to kick this off with this first question. I'm going to start on my left first. What are some of the primary challenges and opportunities that you perceive for Black real estate developers in Detroit today? And so I'm going to start that off. Chase, you've gone last. I'm going to start with you, and we'll start and go to the right.
All right, I'm going to start with the opportunities first, because there are things that we've created in Detroit that don't exist in other markets. So I talked about building community value. BCV is not the only resource in this ecosystem that we've created. I think of BCV as the undergraduate course. If you've never done real estate development before, or if you've only done, 1 or 2 residential rehabs, coming into BCV, you learn how to do what we call a pro forma, so the financial analysis of a deal. You understand, what it's like to be a developer. Not on the construction side. We're not teaching people how to install a window or put down tile. It's how do you understand if this is a good project? How do you do the analysis? Who do you talk to if you need financing or when you need financing? How do you interface with the city, et cetera? So that's sort of the starting point. We have another organization called Capital Impact Partners. They're a nonprofit financial institution. We think of them as the graduate course. So similar fundamentals that you're learning, but the goal after that course is that you're doing a $1 million, $5 million, $10 million deal, right? So the approach is different, the scale is different. And then I mentioned READ, the Real Estate Association of Developers, which is sort of an umbrella organization for all Black developers in the city. And it's ballooned in the past few years. It started off as a networking group, but now we are interfacing with the city. We're helping draft legislation with city council. We talk to the MEDC and MISHDA, so the economic development organizations for the state that are in real estate development. Like, we really are advocating and building with sort of these ecosystem actors. So I think those are the opportunities in Detroit, especially for Black Detroiters. The challenges, one is the market challenge. If you think about all of the big projects that we see, from the skyscraper that's going up downtown to the Henry Ford Future of Health, like all of these big projects where you hear about all of the tax incentives that developers are getting, it's because the market isn't functioning properly. Right? When you build something, the market is saying it's not worth the money that you put into that project. So you actually need to fill the gap with some of these incentives, some of this free money. If you think that it's hard downtown, if the Illiches and others need that money, when you're in the neighborhoods doing, a 100+ unit residential project or, a commercial project, the gaps are even harder to fill. You can't get as much rent, in the neighborhoods if you're doing these kinds of projects. Lenders, depending on where you are, don't have confidence in the neighborhoods that you're trying to invest in. right? So that access to capital is really, really difficult. I think that is probably the greatest challenge for not just Black developers, for development in the city in general. We're seeing it in greater downtown. We're definitely seeing it in the neighborhoods. And it's a limited supply of capital, right? There's not, if you talk to any funder, any lender, talk to government, there's just not enough to go around. So they're picking strategic areas of the city where they want to invest, the strategic neighborhoods, which some of our other panelists might talk about. But as a lifelong Detroiter, you know, I grew up at Puritan and Greenfield, and I'm like, all right, well, when is investment going to get there? It's in my neighborhood. I live in Bagley now, but you know, my family still lives where I grew up. So when will investment get to these other neighborhoods? That's probably one of the greatest challenges.
Well, I can attest to some of that, especially as an outsider. There are a lot of programs and opportunities here that don't exist, right? As I mentioned before, there's no equity-focused home, right? They're not going to be looking at, you know, how do we get more Black developers in the space? But the biggest challenge, when you mention the 1%, for women, it's 0.00001 in a development space. You know, it's even much harder for women in general, and then let alone Black women to participate. And then when you're talking about a development like mine that's using the incentives that you just mentioned, low-income housing tax credits, very, very, very few Black people and even fewer Black women even participate in that space. There are a lot of barriers that already keep us outside of that. But as you mentioned, I'm in the neighborhood. So my project is in Russell Woods, and I had to do a lot of convincing, a lot of financial engineering to even make it pencil out so that, you know, besides them looking at the neighborhood at the top, at the state level, saying this neighborhood's not ready, I got that a lot. For 2 years, I had to fight that. This neighborhood's not ready. We need to see greater investment, greater commitment from the city. There's too much blight. So I had to fight that already, and they're saying that from Lansing, right? So they're not on the ground knowing that there is a master plan already in place for Russell Woods. They're saying that from, their chair up there, but also making the deal pencil out in the community that doesn't have the walk store, that doesn't have all the other features that's needed on paper so that it can pencil out. So that is, perhaps the greatest challenge and what keeps it from coming into the neighborhoods, and why everything is more concentrated, in the downtown and midtown corridors.
I don't have much more to add to what has been already said, but what I will say is Chase is underselling the program that he manages and the capital impact program, because lenders are now looking at those types of programs. If you've gone through that space, that type of training, it's almost like a badge of validation. Like you've earned the stripes to now come in and access capital. So I just want to highlight that. And I think one of the biggest challenges that prevents development from happening in neighborhoods is trying to convince a lender that it's the right use for a particular parcel in their community. Too often, the folks who manage capital do not look like us. And we have to continue elevating ourselves into those spaces and occupying those spaces within those institutions to almost break a bad system, break a bad, sort of thought process, and start really lending that capital out to neighborhoods. I've been in spaces where I know of a very unique project, art-driven, community space-driven, and I had a lender say, does the neighborhood really need something like that? And it's like, that's not for you to decide, right? The community has spoken and said, this is what they want to do and this is what they need. So it's about meeting people where they are and understanding that institutions don't know everything. And I think accessing capital to do what the people in the neighborhoods need has been one of the greatest challenges, and they tend to depend on philanthropy to support those projects instead of traditional lending. So those are some of the challenges, but there are many more.
I would agree with everything that my fellow panelists have said, and I think it cannot be overemphasized that one of the big challenges that we also have is that although we are a very Black city, we are still the blackest city, the blackest large city in America. The connection to the political power and capital needed to be able to drive the policy changes necessary to be able to unlock access to capital is huge in the city of Detroit. But with groups like READ, you're starting to see that change. And also really understanding how we are supporting our Black developers, right? So whenever you have a development that's coming into the neighborhood, ideally Black, white, Hispanic, Middle Eastern, North African, those developers should be engaging the community and actually understanding, one is what I'm proposing, what the community needs, and working with them. And so I think for me, that's also a great opportunity, is making sure that as community, we know what we want to see in our community. We know that we need more senior, affordable housing, right? So as community, one of the things that we can do is show up to a city council meeting or planning commission meeting with developers like Fabiola and say, hey, no, we want this. City, let's try to make less red tape for her, right? We can also serve as references, because there are some really great opportunities that are alternative funding models that really rely on from our Community Development Financial Institutions, CDFIs, acronym of the day, that look at not just what you have in your bank account, but really look at the impact that you're going to have on community. And being able to work in partnership with those residents, those community development organizations, to be able to support developers like that is key. And as they've already said, mission-driven work is expensive. And there's 3 letters that are in the world of development that people argue about all the time, is the AMI. The AMI is what people will generally set. The federal government says this is like this will set the rate for like what your affordability should be. In Detroit, it's not just set on what residents in the city of Detroit make as their average income. It is set for Warren and Livonia. And so when you think about affordability, what is affordable in Warren is not necessarily going to be affordable here, right? And so really thinking about, in terms of federal policy, what does that look like? What does innovative policy look like? Innovative policy look like on a city level to be able to change that factor and make it more accessible and to unlock other funding here to be able to support that mission-driven work, because $1,600 for a 1-bedroom is not affordable downtown, and it is surely not affordable it's not affordable in the neighborhoods, especially when you start getting into projects that are also thinking about things like climate resiliency and how do you make those projects more sustainable.
Thank you. So we've heard about policy and finance and working in neighborhoods and convincing Lansing that the incentives will be well invested, and also, things like building community value. So given the fact that there's this broad spectrum of support and this focus in the city of Detroit on diversity and development, I'm curious if any of you have insights to share about what are the bright spots, what are the things that we need to do more of, and then what's missing? What do you feel like, hey, even though we have these resources available, even though there are programs, there are developers sort of, pushing open the doors, particularly for women and other people of color, there are financing programs, there's a need for policy change, there's civic engagement. What's missing?
Well, I can jump in because Chase and I were talking about this. What's really missing, at least, for me, is seeing more women, right? I'm usually at the table with a whole bunch of white guys, and it can be very intimidating as a woman, dealing with in a male-dominated business as it is, right? And then when that business is predominantly white as well. And I was saying earlier, I'm learning the Black men that's developing, that's in the business, but being able to see other women be able to come online and do these projects at scale as well. And a lot of that, as we were talking, is the financial security and being able to do that, being able to get the pre-dev funding and all the capital that it takes. But I would love to be able to see that as a woman, to have more women at the table, and it's not just dominated by a few who are in the affordable housing space.
So there's lots of things that are missing. I'm going to pick one, though. So I think there's a perception in the city of Detroit that our government works efficiently for developers, right? When we see these big development projects that are happening throughout the city, I think most people who might not be connected to real estate are like, well, okay, this system must be working. But no matter if you're, again, a white male developer with resources or you're a Black developer in a neighborhood, the city hasn't yet gotten its systems right. There are actually departments within the city to help shepherd you through a system that doesn't work. Like, they recognize that the system is so broken that they have people within one team in particular that helps to shepherd you through all of the problems that you're going to encounter within city departments. So we haven't gotten that structure right, and I don't know. It's not just a question of resources. There's been a lot more money. There's been a lot more staffers who have been hired, but the departments don't play nice together. And if you're dealing with BSeed versus planning and development department, right? A lot of these departments aren't talking to each other. I'll give you a primary example. This happens to a lot of people, so it's not just my project. I hear this over and over again. You buy a building from the city, so it's not just the Detroit Land Bank Authority, but the city itself, also through the Detroit Building Authority, also owns properties. You buy a property, and these properties have been sitting vacant for 10, 20 or more years. So I just bought a property, it's been vacant for 20 years. And the moment that we purchase from the city, we start getting blight tickets. Now, mind you, we are working with other city departments, right, on our site plan review, on everything else, right? The city knows we are actively working to develop the project. It takes at least a year to get your financing in place, right, oftentimes. So everyone who's in planning knows what we're doing, but BSeed is still ticketing us. So again, these other departments that have to then call BSeed and say, hey y'all, stand down, right? So these systems are broken, they're not working well, and for those who aren't connected, right, like I can call somebody. But if you've ever gone to these sort of ticket hearings where just normal folk who have purchased a property cheaply in a neighborhood, because you can get a building, some of these buildings are in terrible shape and you can get them for $5,000, $10,000, and don't really understand the system that they're about to have to deal with. These tickets could be thousands of dollars that these property owners don't have. So how do you then start taking properties away from Black people? That's how. These broken systems where the departments are talking to each other. So we haven't gotten the internal workings quite right yet.
I would say some of the things that are missing are just access to forgivable pre-dev dollars. Sometimes just testing out a model, seeing if it can work, costs money, and not everyone has access to that kind of capital or that equity just to see if it's a feasible project. So I think having more capital that may be lost is sometimes worth just trying to figure it out, just to see if it's the right thing to do. I think that we also have our city doesn't do a great job of doing site readiness. So these are sites that they identify as a city to help attract development or to RFP out to developers to then develop. Even if it's not city dollars that are going into the project, this could just be like, hey, here are sites available that we need developed. If you can, please develop those. So I think the more site readiness that we can do, prepping land ahead of a developer is another big piece. And I would also add, we just have a tax issue too. City of Detroit, we have the highest property taxes in the city. So these abatements that we often go after, they wear off. And then what is that going to do to our communities? 10, 12 years from now, when these properties go upside, underwater, what are we going to do to support them, staying alive and staying as an asset in our communities? It's a big concern that I have. And until we can pivot, maybe, I know the land value tax is a big conversation that's happening across the city. Some see it as a valuable tool. Some see it as a threat. We don't know. But we have to do something in order to lower property taxes on residential structures, commercial structures, and then incentivize development on some of these vacant structures in our communities to push out speculation that has been holding back our communities from being able to thrive.
I don't have much to add to what my fellow panelists have already said, but one of the things I do think that is absolutely missing when we're talking about the development landscape in the city of Detroit, and it's even more broadly in terms of its impact for residents, is really increased investment in our infrastructure. It is one thing to be able to put together an amazing project, be able to develop it, but if no one tells you, oh, the sewer system that you're going to have to tap into that is over 100 years old, and we've already had numbers of issues that are crumbling, And now you have a project that maybe you now have like an additional $200,000 to have to come in and fix. And oh, by the way, this particular line only so far is owned by the city of Detroit. And no one told you that, oh, you now have to pay because this is technically your private property where this lead line is. You're responsible for it. So I think that really thinking about how we can actively, the development community as well as residents, continue to push our city to think about within our budget, how do we address infrastructure, not just our water infrastructure, but also how are we working with DTE and how are we working with other utilities to be able to make sure that the upgrades are there so that we really are building the best infrastructure processes necessary, making sure that we have properties that have the ability to tap into broadband across our city, making sure that as the EV revolution is coming to Detroit, that these new properties have the electrical infrastructure necessary to be able to put in charging stations, making sure that we have the ability, to have solar panel, community-powered solar panels, to be able to help to have alternative sources to energy for our developments. So that's the only thing that I would say. Infrastructure.
All right. Let's give some energy to our panelists. That's right. Appreciate it. Yeah. And give some energy to yourselves. I'm looking out there. Everyone looks good. I mean, Detroit, when the weather warms up and the sun is out, we feel good. We bring that here. So, I'm looking forward to mixing and mingling and kicking it with folks at this Detroit Diaspora Day Party. I want to get into some more questions first, and I've got some specific questions that sort of build on some of the things that we've heard. And Detroit Future City, it's a think tank, and you all are bringing these incredible reports about various issues that Detroiters are facing that sort of brings this development conversation at a different scale, right? Where the home that people own, and the blocks that people are on. And so you all have issued reports recently about inherited properties and some of the challenges that exist with that. You've talked about valuation of Black properties. So let's talk about how important it is to understand what's happening at the community level. And I'd love to hear some perspectives on what developers are seeing in relation to this. But you all are bringing this to the forefront. Talk a little more about it, Nicole.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, it really was just coincidence that I'm sitting here with my friend Darnell. So I am really excited. You all should have copies of our Keeping Your Family Home report. So we talk a lot about the communities that these developments are going into. And you already heard Fabiola talk about how in Russell Woods, lenders are like, oh, there's nothing there. It's just blight. But not understanding the beauty that's in the neighborhood, that is one of the oldest neighborhoods in the city, the inherent value of having generational homes that are within that community. And so one of the things that was brought to our attention through a wonderful, I would say, cosmic coincidence of projects working at different points from the city and philanthropy and others was that during the time of the ARPA dollars really coming in is that people needed funding to be able to fix roofs, to be able to take part in the Detroit Home Program. But what we were finding was that the city, in part philanthropy, had developed this amazing program, but people could not tap into it. People could not get the funding that they needed. Why? Because their homes were a tangled, titled mess. So a lot of times, unfortunately, we buy our biggest asset that we will ever purchase in life, which is our homes, right? But we don't always consider or think about what happens when somebody passes. No one likes to think about death. It's very morbid. You want to think about the life that you have. But if you're really thinking about keeping and preserving generational wealth, we really need to think, what will happen when I leave here? Is my home in a trust? Do I have it in a will? Oh my God, what does it look like if I have to go through the probate process? And so what we found is in the city of Detroit, in a report that got released earlier this year, is that there are over 5,000 homes that are at risk of being lost because of tangled titles, right? So it can be everything from no one is on the title to you may have family that have inherited this home and just say if one person who's not connected and has moved on and maybe be disconnected to the family, if there is a speculator that is able to buy the rights from that one person, then that means everything is put on hold, and that person has the ability to then go in and start to buy out the rights of everyone else, and for the who has rights to their home, and to be able to own it. We're seeing this happen much more aggressively in other cities like New York and across the country, where you start to see gentrification happen because people haven't owned their homes, and it allows these spaces. So we're really excited that we've been able to work with the Gilbert Family Foundation to be able to publish this report. And also with this report, we've published a toolkit, right? Because we wanted to make sure that people had all the tools necessary to understand what their home purchase journey looks like and how they can go from the purchase journey to the protection journey. Because it's about, when we talk about housing in the city of Detroit, we look at it as a three-legged stool. There is the purchasing of your home. So we have a ton of reports that we've done around mortgages and access to homes over the last 2 years. And then it's about maintaining the home. Like, how are you accessing funds to be able to provide the maintenance repairs on your home? And then it's about preserving your home. So I would highly encourage you all to please check it out, and also visit our website to download the free toolkit and to share, and have those uncomfortable conversations with grandma, grandpa, great auntie, and even yourselves. And what we found is that these were not issues that were just in one zip code. We found homes in Grandma Rosedale, in the Live 6 corridor. So these are issues that are happening throughout the city of Detroit and have the ability to upend the community, even really stable, traditional, middle-class neighborhoods.
And what is your website?
www.detroitfuturecity.com.
And Nicole also was gracious enough to bring reports with her. So I see some of you have them, but they are right over to my right. So make sure that you stop and get a hard copy of that report, and to really dig into that really critical data. And most importantly, that toolkit that she mentioned that would be helpful. So yeah, tell everybody. Fabiola, you talked a little bit about the state and local resources that you had to access in order to, start your development project and really start that journey here in Detroit. Are there any ones in particular that you felt like were important as you were starting your project? And then what kind of tips would you have for someone who's an aspiring developer in the room who may say, where do I start? How do I even get into this journey? I would love to hear more about your story there.
Yeah, just as some background, when I first bought the building, I initially, thought I could just get, traditional debt on it, red tape already, just because it's in Russell Woods. So I went to the state, to Michigan State Housing Development Authority, to talk about LIHTC, low-income housing tax credits. And that was what I mentioned before, where it was just a 2-year process of even having to convince them that this neighborhood is doable, and to also bring the city, the planning department, HRD, on board together to package something. So initially, we spent 2 years of just packaging everything that's happening or planned for that neighborhood, from the master plan to proposed developments, even if there were no funding there. The streetscape project, which just broke down a few weeks ago, just really creating that story. And that, a lot of times, that's what you have to do. You have to be your own best advocate, because you already have these challenges. So I really had to just put that together so that I can come back to the state. I went through 3 rounds of funding. There's only 2 rounds, so pretty much it took me 3 years just to even get my project funded. And not only that, with LIHTC, there's a lot of other barriers, right? So I had to just navigate some of those things. So one of those is the experience requirements, right? If you haven't done 7+ low-income housing projects, you can't really do the project alone, right? Maybe in other neighborhoods, but not in a neighborhood like Russell Woods, where I already don't have the points, right? I don't have the walkability. I don't have a lot of the amenities and, the other application requirements that they require. So I'm already looking at, my project is not scoring well. And that's what happens in neighborhoods like this. You're going for these dollars, and they have a metric that does not adjust for the neighborhood. It's a metric that exists at the very top, and you have to now figure out how do you squeeze your project in this community to fit a metric that was developed from, a higher level that didn't consider how we modify it for communities like this. So, it took me 3 rounds, each time having to re-engineer it, putting this round project into a square peg hole. But, and I had to make adjustments. So those are some of the things. You have to understand the dynamics, right, behind that works, the system of how it's created, how that works. And, I quickly realized that if I'm going to have to, figure this out, if I'm going to get this development funded, there was no other dollars that could work for this. It had to be LIHTC. Just because of the challenges in that neighborhood. So it was really looking at all of the dynamics. Just to even give you some background, on the application they asked for things like within the mile, is there a pharmacy? Is there a clinic? Is there a library, a school, a grocery store? And so, some of those things don't exist, some do, but even Lansing was telling me that's not a real grocery store. So I literally had to go into the food farm and take pictures and video of the different departments. I mean, on the application, they asked you, okay, a grocery store in our definition is that it has fresh produce, it has paper goods, there's a meat department, there's, a number of things. And there's 8 categories. I literally had to go into the food farm and take pictures of all of these to say, look, this is a real grocery store. It may not look like a real grocery store to you. This is what the community has, right, as a grocery store, but this is valid. So those are the challenges that you deal with coming into a community like that. But understanding that, what that metric is, and just being smarter than the system to figure out how do you make your project work with metrics that were not designed for projects like yours.
Appreciate that. And Chase, I want to just use that as an opportunity to also just give another shout out to Chase, because BCV, this is what you all are walking folks through and kind of giving those instructions. Anything you want to follow up to tell folks about building community value and what they might learn in that as someone looking to get into development?
Yeah, so in thinking about where to start, you can start with building community value. We do take it really slowly, right? So the goal is starting with really high-level concepts, like what is real estate development in the first place? Like, why do you do it? I heard Nicole bring in the word gentrification, right? What is gentrification? Like, we use that word, how do you define it? Everybody has a different definition. So talking about those kinds of concepts first, before we dig into the actual pro forma, the numbers, the financing sources, the state agencies, the city departments, all of those things. And we do bring in, like I said, we bring in lenders, we bring in resource partners so that people can actually ask questions. I teach the course, but I step back and I'm like, all right, so here are the 3 lenders in front of you. Ask whatever questions that you need about your different projects, about how the ecosystem works, about all the barriers that you face and how you get over those barriers. So it really is a real world way to get questions answered and sort of get introduced to what the ecosystem is. And for us, like, we definitely want people to do projects. Like, that's the goal, right? We want people to go back out into their neighborhoods, and most people are doing like 1 to 4 unit residential who come out of BCV. I want them to scale up eventually to 50, 100, 200 unit apartment building, but you have to start somewhere. So this is people's starting point. And what we also find is some people have already bought a land bank property. So people come in having already purchased something. They may have overspent. They may not yet know how much they'll need to invest to bring that property back to life. Like, they haven't done the analysis yet. So it's critical that they're in the course. They're sort of in crisis phase. They're like, I already bought the thing. What do I do with it now? So we're helping guide them through that process of understanding what to do. But I really want people to get into these kinds of programs before purchasing something, because even if you do the analysis and you realize that deal doesn't work, right, it is better that you understand that upfront before you put $1 in, before you lose any money. And that's really our goal. We want to save people from the headache, the heartburn, the anxiety, the stress of purchasing something that, is you're just gonna sink money into it without really getting the return that you want. We have people who come in for all different kinds of reasons. So some people are about building generational wealth, right? And are really return focused. How can I get the return that I'm seeking? Some other people come in, they want to keep housing affordable for their neighbors. Like, that's the goal. And there's often this light bulb moment for folks. Like, I love when people want to do affordable housing, right? Come into the course, we can talk about it. You do the financial analysis, and usually people do the analysis right, but they're worried. They're like, all right, well, I put in all the numbers. I know how much this is going to cost to rehab. I know how much the acquisition price is. I put in a contingency, a buffer, in case things are more expensive than I anticipated. Why is the number red, right? Why did I do something wrong? It's like, you didn't do anything wrong. This project, without subsidy, right, will not work. So we have to help people through that process of understanding, again, how this market is not functioning well in the city, right? If you purchase a land bank house for $20K, and you need to put 80K in, so you're 100K all in, but the market is telling you that property is only worth $70,000 or $80,000, should you do that deal? Right? That's the kinds of questions that we're asking in BCV and walking people through. So there's that. And to Darnell's point earlier, it's BCV, Capital Impact Partners, like these programs, if you actually go through, you get your certificate, when you approach a lender, they know that you have support, right? We have our alum who come back to us all the time with the project saying, all right, I went through the course, I learned the concepts, now I'm really ready to apply it, can you help, in real time, and we do. And that gives a lender, or that gives, the city of Detroit comfort to know, all right, they can go and ask someone and really work through their pro forma, work through their presentations, work through all the things they need to submit to make these projects work.
All right, and tell folks where they can get more information. What's the website?
So it's BCV, so Building Community Value, bcvdetroit.org.
All right, and Fabiola, you wanted to add something on to what Chase mentioned?
So development is about momentum, right? So I knew what it took for me to get this one development off the table. So I knew that if there are others who wanted to come into this Dexter Ave corridor, that I need to create momentum for Dexter, right? So what I'm even doing now is really aligning a placemaking strategy around my building. It's the tallest structure in that neighborhood. It's 12 stories. So, from an optics, right, it helps if this can be a catalyst. So I have a whole placemaking vision in my planning to where about 8 blocks down, I'm purchasing a commercial site with 5 retail units. I have a lot immediately across the street from me where hopefully at this later round this year that we'll be going for LIHTC. But I know that that's what it's going to take so that the next developer is not having to deal with some of those same challenges, like this neighborhood's not ready. There's no other projects around here. It's really about creating momentum. So wherever your project is or your development, you have to think about also the bigger picture, the broader strategy of how not just for your own project, but selfishly too, it helps, my development. But how do I create this momentum so that if I do want to develop or do anything else in this neighborhood, or if anyone else comes in, obviously whatever others do is helping to add value to my development as well.
Thank you for that. So we're going to ask one more. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just quick follow-up to that. So I love that you're doing this first really big project. But the thing that we need more of in the city is de-risking these projects for Black developers, right? Because you're taking a risk, right? Being that first developer in to do a large project, and that's a capital risk, right? Your money or your investor's money is on the line. We see a lot of the projects in greater downtown being de-risked for large, wealthy white developers, right? In the strategic neighborhoods, so there are 10 strategic neighborhoods throughout the city. These are places where the city and, again, CDFIs have decided that we're going to try to de-risk these projects in very small areas, right? SNF neighborhoods might seem big, but where the investment is actually happening on the commercial corridors is pretty small. It's like 2 or 3 blocks oftentimes. So we need more strategies to de-risk these projects for Black developers. Darnell mentioned pre-development. This is when you're doing your feasibility analysis, right? Is there environmental contamination? What are the boundaries of the project with the survey? Are there title issues that Nicole mentioned? All of that costs money. That costs thousands of dollars to do that kind of research and due diligence beforehand. A developer is paying that out of pocket. A lot of times it's harder for Black developers to find that equity. Again, we need more capital to do that kind of work, to de-risk these projects in our neighborhoods.
Thank you, Chase, and that's actually a perfect segue for our question that we're getting ready to ask Darnell. And then we are going to hear from you, because you all, I can see your wheels turning, I can see you have questions, and we want to spend a good 15 to 20 minutes giving you an opportunity to express what's on your mind. What are you thinking about, and hear from the experts directly. But back to that strategic neighborhood strategy, and particularly the $15 million that the Gilbert Family Foundation re-upped and provided to support the Strategic Neighborhood Fund. It's the 3rd phase of funding. So this is obviously a program that's working and something that you all are continuing to invest in. So talk a little bit about that, and how do people access those dollars?
Yeah, so SNF, as we affectionately call it, is a program that really does help to de-risk neighborhood-based projects. So it's the lender being Invest Detroit, who houses all these dollars. So if you go to investdetroit.org, investdetroit.org, or no, investdetroit.com. You can learn more about the Strategic Neighborhood Fund. But essentially, what I love about SNF is development. You can do it all day, every day, you know, in your sleep. But SNF requires this community engagement process with most projects that are going in. Basically, let's talk to the residents. Is what is being proposed really what's needed in this community, which is really important. Which properties to activate first makes, you know, sometimes makes or breaks a project as well, because the goal of SNF is to sort of spark or act as a catalyst in a neighborhood and allow that energy to sort of reverberate outwards to other communities to help make those neighborhoods, to make the deals, or de-risk those deals as well, because now the value should be coming up. Some of my concerns were related to SNF, and I think that we're trying to find solutions to mitigate against this. Is once you activate an asset, that asset creates value. And that value can sometimes affect rent prices and potentially destabilize some communities, people who've been living there long term. Traditionally, I've seen SNF first focus on communities that are primarily homeownership based, so that it's not doing that work. But just knowing that assets do create value, even if they are affordable in nature, even if you're bringing in Black-owned businesses as well. But what I love about SNF is that we're tripling down, because the work is so heavy, it's so much. Like, there was so much disinvestment in our communities that it's taking millions and millions and millions of dollars, multiple rounds of dollars to come into these communities just to pull it back up. And I know we want to see change happen really, really fast, but this issue did not, you know, happen overnight. This took decades of disinvestment, and it's going to take years, hopefully, not decades, but just years of reinvestment to really start bringing our neighborhoods back where they were.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for that, Darnell. And as Clarinda mentioned, we want to bring in some of your voices into this conversation. We've got some time set aside for questions. Before we do, let's give some energy to our panelists one more time. Let's give some energy to Detroit Diaspora. Come on, folks. We got to get some energy to Detroit Diaspora. That's right. Get some energy to yourselves. That's right. All right, they look good. That's right, that's right. So we want to get some questions in, and I'm sure some of you have some questions. So we've got time for a few. So if you want to just raise your hand, if you have a question for our panelists, we'll bring the mics around to you. I'm looking across the audience. I know that it's always that first question. It's like, who's going to ask the first question? All right, okay, we got one question, and I'm going to ask my daughter, going to incorporate our assistant, if you would help us with taking this mic around. Come on, Maya. You know how it is. Got to get the whole family in the business. Go ahead. If you would take
First of all, thank you for this wonderful panel. It was definitely informative, and it's definitely a benefit to our community in addition to all of the wonderful things each of you is doing individually. My question, however, is, are there any other cities that are modeling or really representing a sort of ideal that you all think Detroit might aspire to? I know Detroit is unique in itself, but are there other cities who have maybe a similar population, a similar housing stock, a similar group of investors who are trying to get involved that Detroit could potentially learn from?
I know you probably have. So what I'll add is, I think, depending on what we're talking about, there are places like when it comes to heirs property issues, Jacksonville, Florida tends to be the gold star of how they built a coalition around this work and making sure that residents are educated and are putting those educated enough to know how to move those properties into the proper entities to protect them. When we think about the housing work, and some of the development work, I would look to Cleveland as sort of like a sister city that's going through a similar transition. Some of the things that Chase mentioned earlier around, you know, navigating a broken system for development, I think that Cleveland has done a better job of making sure that that process is a little bit more seamless. Detroit is still working on it, obviously. They've made some improvements, but not significant enough to make it easy. But I would say for those two cities and those two issues, those are the cities I would relate to.
And I would also say one of the things that we didn't talk about today, but we're starting to see more and more movement toward in the city of Detroit, are community land trusts. And so I would also say that we look to cities like Boston and Dudley Street Collective as real pioneers within that particular space as well.
There is one of the first community land trusts in the city happening in North Portland. So you also have examples. We also have examples. Sorry. We're being videoed, so I need to, my outside voice is not enough. There are great examples also of community land trusts in the city. One of the first to actually be approved, and it's happening in North Corktown. So there's some opportunity there. We're going to take another question. This young lady here had her hand up in the black and white.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. My question is, I've recently heard the term 203K rehab loans as an option to invest without using my own money to fix up a property. What are the pros and the cons of such loans?
Sure. So one thing that we talk about in BCV is called a house hack. And it's recognizing that if you have an investment property and you approach a bank, most banks no longer lend for the single family or the duplex. It's very difficult to get financing as an investor at a reasonable interest rate on those kinds of projects. It's hard to go to JP Morgan, Huntington, Bank of America and get those loans. So the house hack is getting a duplex or up to a 4-unit and using traditional principal residence financing. So the 203K allows you to acquire the property and also rehab the property. There's a lot of hand-holding that happens because they actually require you to have a 203K consultant walk you through a construction plan and sort of manage the construction plan for you. So we highly recommend our students who are thinking about getting that first property to use 203K. It's actually a way to not have to put a lot of equity down, right? This is an FHA loan. So you're only putting down like the 3.5%. So you're not putting a lot of equity down. You're getting a consultant who guides you through the process, and you can get that kind of financing from a traditional bank. So if you're going to live in the property, it is for the principal residence. If you're going to live there for, I think, you have to live there for at least a year. It's a good way to do your first project, but it is for the principal residence. But that's what we call the house hack.
My name is Roland Martin. I'm president of the Roland Martin Group. We specialize in, and I'm here to network with folks like you all who've already been in the business. One thing I noticed is that developers don't take in consideration the condition Detroit is in from the riots, where they never developed. My projects are all brownfield, infill development, which include taking dilapidated projects and making them viable. One thing the city do a lot of is tear down houses, and they just leave lots. The thing about infill is you put houses on those lots and rebuild those neighborhoods. So I'm here to network with you all, Mr. Gilbert, because I want him to get some urban cred that he don't have. He do all downtown, but nobody really works in the inner city. And so I'm here to move forward the city. In college, I did a project on rehab in Highland Park, and my professor tore me down on that because he said, don't nobody want to live there. But the future of development is smart development, infill development, brownfield development, and making sure, like my sister here said, the infrastructure meets the projects. Too many people doing projects that, like a guy was going to do a project on Warren in the Boulevard, building houses out of shipping containers. And I'm like, well, that's supposed to be low income, and he want to sell them for $170,000. That's a $30,000 neighborhood. You can't do that. So I'm here to get started and showcase my talents in this city, and I want to network with you all. Thank you.
You know what? I'm just going to follow up on that. The 203K program, I took possession of my grandmother's home on the east side, just outside of Morningside in 2021. I've been renovating it out of pocket. I didn't want to go after any loans because I still want the opportunity to qualify for first-time homebuyer loans. Property's in my mother's name right now, but we need the basement done, we need some more things, and I'm like, okay, this out-of-pocket expenses is just adding up. So I am looking, that's why I came today. I'm looking for more resources to finish developing that property. My son and I do live there, and start thinking ahead to purchasing another one.
And I'm sorry, folks. Let's see, we've got time for just to hear one response, but the panelists will be around. You all are sticking around for some questions. So if we can't get, Nicole, you want to go ahead and respond to that? Yeah, go ahead. Okay, all right. So we got some networking. So the panelists will be around. They're going to stick around. So I encourage you, if you have questions, we want to make certain that you do get that opportunity to network, that we do talk about this. We understand how important it is to developing in Detroit, to sharing and highlighting resources for Detroit and other cities. So I think that's important. Thank you, Maya. I appreciate you coming to help us out. That's right. Give it up. Get the whole family. So one final question, and then we're gonna ask B. Colvin to come up here and close it out and tell folks what's next. So if you just take 1 minute each, I like to hear, I like to look ahead, right? I like to, give some vision, some intention towards what's happening in the future. And so 20 years from now, what is your vision? What would an inclusive Detroit, what would it mean to have solved this problem, have addressed this problem? What would you like to see? 20 years in the future, how would you like to see Detroit developed through an equitable lens? I know that's a big question, but I'm gonna give it over to you. Okay, Darnell's gonna start us off.
I'll try to be brief. 1 minute. 20 years from now, Detroit, I think, will be one of our strongest pillars would be like, this is a city you can be a homeowner in. Again, I think that homeownership has been so out of reach, and the work that we are doing right now around modular housing and manufactured prefab housing, trying to attract those industries to our city, the goal is to put the agency back in the hands of individuals and not necessarily that of corporations and some developers with good intention, but the goal is, how do we help you, knowing that we have all this vacant land, all these missing teeth in our neighborhoods, and some of these neighborhoods are still beautiful and tree-lined, just have these gaps. How do we reactivate those lots, put these houses onto them, because modular and prefab housing is more climate resilient, it's hurricane resistant, it's gorgeous and beautiful if you have the right tools and the right products. And I think that in 20 years, this will be a very populated and homeowner-rich city again.
All right. Follow that.
So very similar, but for me, when I think about Detroit 20 years from now, I see a city that has the right balance of housing and open space land use, right? Like, there are changes that are happening. Climate change is here, it's not going anywhere, and we have to be able to be prepared for it. The city of Detroit currently has 19 square miles of vacant land. And so we understand that everything cannot be open space, but it is about how do you strike that balance between infill housing. We have, as you said, a lot of missing teeth in the city. We have beautiful neighborhoods that maybe have had blocks where you might have 2 houses here, 3 houses there, areas that have been demoed through the land bank. But thinking about how do we rebuild the capacity of those neighborhoods to be able to have the kinds of housing and the mix of housing that's needed so that our population can age in place. Like, you may love your neighborhood, but at 87, you might not want to climb up 3 flights of stairs, but you might want to live into a senior housing complex, or as a starter home, you may need something that's a little bit smaller. But really thinking about how do you have neighborhoods that have the diversity of housing built by Black and brown developers that have access to the capital, but also thinking about how are we strengthening and making our commercial corridors resilient. I'm a Bagley kid, ride or die, West Sider, and I have loved seeing, I grew up seeing the Livernois corridor with B. Spiegel and Terry's Place and Motown Photography and Sibley's. And it does my heart justice. I was out to dinner with a friend yesterday. I was like, I love this. I say, I don't have to go downtown to hang out. I can go to Fame 313 and get my gear for opening day. I get my hair done at Miss Terry still. Second generation business, starting with third generation there now. And so that's what I see and I value in a really strong, community, climate resilience in strong, amenity-rich, middle-class neighborhoods. That's not saying that everybody there is middle class, even though we want everybody to have middle-class wage jobs, but every resident in the city of Detroit should have the right to have access to neighborhoods that are strong, that are stable, that have housing diversity, and that also have all of the amenities from parks, schools, commercial developments that they need.
All right, that's right. Yeah. Nicole got an office in your future. There we go.
So,
all right, take it over here.
I feel like that's a mic drop, right? So Nicole just said all the things. So I live in Bagley. I also love Bagley. What I want on the commercial side, because residential is important. We talk a lot about housing, but I want us not to have to go to Dearborn, Livonia, Ferndale, Royal Oak to shop, right? I want us to have more Detroit People Food Co-ops that just opened. If you haven't visited, please visit. Right throughout the city, I want us to be able to access the core amenities that we need in our neighborhoods where the building and the business is owned by Black people. And sort of on a softer sense, and Nicole also referenced this, is that I want Detroit to still be Black 20 years from now, just period. 80% or 77% Black now. I hope that we are still a majority Black city, but I want Black Detroiters to no longer feel like they have lost something. No matter who I talk to, whether they are 10 years old or 70 years old, people have stories of their school closing, that retail closing, that house being torn down. Like, this is constant stream of having lost something. So I hope 20 years from now, people feel ownership over their neighborhood and their city, and that they no longer feel like they have lost something, but that they have ownership over something that is beautiful and robust and reflects them.
All right.
Well, there's nothing more I can add to what's already been said, but when Nicole mentioned climate change, right, I think that can be what the model is. Coming from Miami, where that's ground zero for us, we look at a community like this where sustainability could be the model that communities like ours are not really perfecting, or should be perfecting, but are not really doing well. So with mobility comes everything else that surrounds that. Those are the pillars for it, and I think that should be the model for the entire nation.
I love it. All right, let's give this panel some energy one more time. Let's give some energy to Detroit Diaspora. Come on, right? Let's give some energy to these words. We have the power to make it happen, right? So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna make this happen. Ms. Harrison, I know 20 years from now, you're gonna still be looking 25 and in the city. We'll be in the city, so we're gonna speak that in there too. Be COVID, man. Anything you want to say, Ms. Harrison, before let me turn this over to you? No, that's good. All right. Thank you all. I'm going to turn it over to Brandon. All right, brother.
All right.
Peace, everybody. My name is Brandon Colvin. I am one of the co-organizers of the Detroit Diaspora Day Party. I want to welcome all of you. We're really excited to have you. The day is just getting kicked off, so quickly give a round of applause for yourselves.
Right.
And we most certainly want to thank our esteemed panel. Not only was it informative, it was extremely inspiring to have you all share with us, and we're thankful for the work you are doing, the action and the inspiration that you are giving to this Detroit community. Also, moving forward, we've got a lot of vendors in place. We've got more vendors coming. We're about to kick off some good music today. We've got some great food, culture. All of you are a part of this. This is not just about coming here to absorb. It's about coming here to share as well. And I know we're about to work into some brief networking. We also have some gifts for all of you. So we'll be handing those out. And I don't want to talk too much, but other than to say thank you, we're excited you're here. And please, please, please enjoy yourself. And call people. Tell your folks to come. We got a long day here, so and we're going to be here all day. So thanks again, y'all, and enjoy yourselves.
So please stay behind. Our panelists have decided that they will stay a little bit to do networking. So those of you who didn't get to ask questions, you'll be able to do that. And then I know Nicole wanted to grab the mic really quickly and talk about one more resource, and let's get this networking started.
So last year, there was a really great program for developers that was launched in partnership with Invest Detroit and the Kresge Foundation and Ember Imprint, and it is called Embria, and it is an $11 million fund designed to support developers of color in the city of Detroit. And it's not just the funding, but it really is those core technical skills and wraparound services that you need. So if you are a developer, you're thinking about doing a little bit of a larger scale development, I highly encourage you all to connect with our partners over at Invest Detroit with Mike Smith and his team in the Department of Neighborhoods to be able to tap into that program, and they are currently accepting applications now.
All right.